The Horus Heresy is remembered as an inevitability, a galaxy-wide tragedy framed as destiny, a rebellion whispered into existence by gods that feed on betrayal, ambition, and despair. In the histories of the Imperium, Horus Lupercal is portrayed as a pawn, a once noble son reduced to a slave of chaos, his fall presented as proof that no being, no matter how great, can resist the warp forever. But that version of history is convenient. It simplifies events that were anything but simple. It reduces choice to corruption and strategy to madness. Because Horus was never a mindless servant. He was never a frothing zealot screaming praises to dark gods. Horus was a general, a strategist, a ruler who understood that wars are not won by passion alone, but by logistics, control, and the ability to shape reality itself. And that is where the official narrative begins to crack. The Chaos Gods did not elevate Horus because he loved them. They elevated him because he could be used. Even at the height of his corruption, Horus resisted Chaos's fundamental weakness, its need for endless conflict. Chaos does not seek victory, it seeks continuation, eternal war, endless emotion, a galaxy that never stabilizes, because stability starves the warp. Horus, however, did not want an eternal war. He wanted an end to the Emperor's secret tyranny, an end to being a disposable tool of gods who would discard him the moment his purpose was fulfilled. This contradiction is critical because it reveals something the Imperium refuses to acknowledge. Horus's greatest betrayal was not against the Emperor. It was against inevitability itself. Because at several points during the heresy, Horus stood at a crossroads. One path led deeper into chaos, into madness, mutation, and eventual annihilation. The other was never spoken of, never recorded, and deliberately erased. A path colder than the warp, older than humanity. A path that did not promise freedom, faith, or glory, only victory. And this is where the Necrons enter the story. Not as saviors, not in any moral sense, but as the only power in the galaxy that truly understood what Horus feared, the warp. The Necrons had fought gods before. They had shattered Star-Eaters, enslaved reality itself, and survived the war in heaven by rejecting everything chaos represents. They do not feel temptation. They do not worship. They do not dream. They erase. And for a Warmaster seeking control over a galaxy drowning in gods, that kind of power is not heresy. It is logic. So today, we are not asking a question of fantasy. We are asking a question of strategy. What if Horus betrayed Chaos before Chaos could betray him? What if he reached beyond the warp, beyond faith, beyond emotion, and aligned himself with the one force capable of silencing gods? If he had, the galaxy would not remember the Horus Heresy as a war of fire and demons. It would remember it as the moment the stars themselves went silent. The Imperium teaches that Horus fell because he was weak, because pride opened the door, because no soul, not even a Primarch's, can resist the warp forever. This explanation is comforting. It turns a catastrophic failure of Imperial design into a moral lesson. But it is also wrong. Horus did not fall because he was weak. He fell because he was designed to question authority. Unlike many of his brothers, Horus was not a specialist. He was not forged solely as a weapon, a scholar, or an executioner. He was made to command other Primarchs, beings who were themselves demigods of war. That required more than loyalty. It required judgment. Horus was raised to evaluate systems, leaders, and outcomes. He learned to assess whether orders were effective, whether sacrifices were justified, and whether victories were sustainable.
This mindset put him on a collision course with both the Emperor and Chaos, because neither truly tolerates independent judgment. The Emperor demanded obedience cloaked in rationality. Chaos demanded devotion disguised as freedom. Horus trusted neither. Even before his corruption, Horus repeatedly questioned imperial strategy. He saw the cracks in the Great Crusade, worlds brought to compliance through overwhelming force, cultures erased in the name of unity, and lies told to humanity about the nature of the warp. The Emperor claimed secrecy was protection. Horus saw it for what it was, control through ignorance. When chaos finally reached for Horus, it did not seduce him with faith or love. It offered him truth, or at least a version of it. The existence of gods, the hypocrisy of the imperial truth, the inevitability of conflict between psychic humanity and the warp. But chaos made a fatal miscalculation. It assumed that revealing the truth would ensure loyalty. It did not understand Horus's nature. Because Horus did not seek truth for its own sake, he sought leverage. From the very beginning of his corruption, Horus resisted full submission. He did not dissolve into religious ecstasy like Lorgar. He did not pursue excess like Fulgrim. He surrendered his will for rage like Angron. Instead, he attempted to use chaos. He bargained, he negotiated, he delayed. This alone should tell us everything. Chaos gods do not reward hesitation, they exploit it. Horus believed he could balance them, playing the gods against one another, extracting power without surrendering autonomy. In doing so, he revealed both his greatest strength and his fatal flaw. Because chaos does not operate on logic. It operates on hunger. And hunger cannot be satisfied, only redirected. As the heresy progressed, Horus began to realize this. His body decayed, his mind fragmented, his command increasingly relied on daemons and warp entities he did not fully control. The war was being won tactically, but lost strategically. Chaos was reshaping the rebellion into something Horus never intended, an apocalypse without resolution, a galaxy locked in eternal conflict. This was not victory. This was enslavement, and Horus knew it. That realization marks the true turning point, the moment chaos began to lose him. Because once a general recognizes that his allies are undermining the end state of a war, loyalty becomes irrelevant. Chaos needed Horus to burn the galaxy. Horus wanted to rule it. These goals were never compatible. Chaos promised ascension, but ascension is meaningless to a being who understands that gods are simply predators operating on a higher scale. Horus did not want to become divine. He wanted to become final, an authority no god could overrule. This is why the seeds of betrayal were already present long before Terra. Chaos could empower Horus, but it could not stabilize him. It could grant strength, but not permanence. And permanence was everything. A ruler who depends on the warp rules at the mercy of the warp. Horus saw the future chaos offered him, a throne of mutation, a reign defined by madness and eventual consumption by the very gods that crowned him. That is not dominion. That is delay. So the question is not whether Horus could betray chaos. The question is why he ever tolerated it at all. And the answer is simple. Chaos was the only tool available at the time. But tools are meant to be replaced. Once Horus realized that chaos could not deliver a controlled, enduring victory, he would inevitably search for something that could. And that search leads away from gods, faith, and the warp entirely. It leads to silence. It leads to the Necrons.
Chaos has enemies, but only one predator. The Necrons are not merely resistant to chaos, they are an existential contradiction to it. Where chaos is emotion, the Necrons are negation. Where chaos feeds on belief, the Necrons eradicate the very conditions that allow belief to manifest. This difference is not philosophical, it is structural. Chaos exists because the warp exists. The warp exists because sentient life feels. The Necrons sever that chain. During the war in heaven, long before humanity learned to light its first fire, the Necrons fought entities that make the Chaos gods appear crude by comparison. Star gods, reality devourers, forces that did not whisper temptation, but consumed suns and civilizations without malice or mercy. And they won. At an unimaginable cost, but they won. That victory reshaped them into something utterly alien to the warp. Their consciousness was transferred into living metal bodies, not as a blessing, but as a calculated rejection of vulnerability. No souls, no psychic presence, no emotional resonance for the warp to exploit. To chaos, this is intolerable. The warp cannot touch what it cannot corrupt. This is why Necron technology does not merely resist chaos, it suppresses it. Blackstone pylons do not fight demons with force, they deny them reality. They collapse the interface between real space and the warp, turning psychic dominance into silence. From a strategic perspective, this makes the Necrons the most dangerous force chaos has ever faced. Not because they can defeat demons in battle, but because they make demons irrelevant. Horus would have understood this instantly. As Warmaster, he had witnessed the limitations of warp-based warfare firsthand. Warp storms were powerful but unpredictable. Demons were strong but unreliable. Corruption spread quickly but destabilized command structures and logistics. Chaos won battles. It lost control. The Necrons, by contrast, represent absolute predictability. Their forces do not rout, their weapons do not misfire due to emotional fluctuation. Their strategies are calculated across millennia, not moments of rage. For a commander seeking a decisive galaxy-ending victory, this difference is everything. But there is a deeper reason why the Necrons are Chaos's natural enemy. Chaos requires participation. It must be believed in. Even hatred empowers it. The Necrons demand nothing. They do not convert, they do not persuade, they do not tempt. They simply replace. Every world brought under Necron control becomes quieter. Psychic noise diminishes. Warp activity weakens. Over time, entire regions of space become hostile to demonic manifestation. This is not conquest. It is sterilization. To chaos, this represents starvation on a galactic scale. Now consider what this means in the context of the Horus Heresy. Chaos's greatest strength during the rebellion was not its armies, it was its ability to fracture reality itself. Warp storms isolated loyalist systems, demonic incursions shattered morale, psychic terror spread faster than any fleet. But this strength carried an unspoken weakness. Chaos required escalation. The longer the war lasted, the more extreme its manifestations became. Subtle corruption gave way to open possession. Tactical advantage gave way to uncontrollable mutation. A war chaos could not afford to end. Horus saw this. The Necrons offered the opposite approach. Not escalation, suppression.
Instead of tearing open reality, Necron-aligned forces would seal it shut. Instead of warp storms, null zones. Instead of demonic terror, engineered inevitability. This is why Chaos and the Necrons cannot coexist. Chaos needs a galaxy alive with emotion. The Necrons seek a galaxy reduced to function. From Horus's perspective, this made the Necrons uniquely valuable. They were not rivals for worship. They were not competing gods. They were a solution to the problem Chaos created. And, perhaps most importantly, they could not betray him in the way Chaos inevitably would. Chaos betrays through corruption, through excess, through hunger that cannot be satisfied. The Necrons do not hunger, they calculate. An alliance with Chaos meant eventual consumption. An alliance with the Necrons meant eventual obsolescence. For a strategist like Horus, obsolescence was the lesser threat, because obsolescence could be delayed. Chaos, by its very nature, could not. In this context, the Necrons are not villains or saviors. They are inevitability given form. And for a Warmaster seeking to end a war rather than become it, there was no more logical enemy of Chaos.
If this alliance were ever to exist, it would not begin with trust. It would begin with recognition. Not recognition of shared values or mutual respect, but of capability. Two beings, each ancient in their own way, each responsible for the deaths of uncounted billions, each fully aware that sentiment is a liability in wars of extinction. The silent king, Sarek, does not rule through charisma or faith, he rules through memory. He remembers a galaxy before chaos had names, before humanity existed, before gods were worshipped because there was nothing left to worship. Horus, by contrast, remembers conquest, the forging of unity through violence, the lie of the imperial truth, the slow realization that both his father and the gods of the warp see mortals as tools. Their meeting, therefore, would not be ceremonial, it would be surgical. The silent king would not greet Horus as a king or a warmaster. Titles mean nothing to a being who has seen empires rise and collapse like brief statistical anomalies. He would see Horus as a variable, powerful, unstable, but temporarily useful. And Horus would understand this instantly, because Horus does not seek reverence, he seeks acknowledgement. What the silent king offers first is not an alliance, but a reframing of reality. He would present the galaxy as it truly is, a system poisoned by the warp, destabilized by psychic evolution, and doomed to cycles of collapse as long as emotion-driven entities shape its fate. To Horus, this would not sound like heresy, it would sound like confirmation. The Emperor tried to deny the warp. Chaos seeks to dominate it. The silent king proposes to render it irrelevant. This is the core of their compatibility. Sarek would not promise Horus victory over the Emperor. He would promise something far more dangerous, a galaxy where the Emperor's greatest weapon, humanity's psychic destiny, becomes a liability. He would show Horus projections of regions already affected by Necron null technology, systems where astropaths scream into silence, where demonic manifestations fail to anchor themselves to reality. For Horus, this would be revelatory, because it exposes a truth chaos never admits. The warp is not inevitable, it is contingent, and contingencies can be engineered out of existence. In return, Horus offers something the Necrons lack: scale. The Necrons possess unimaginable technology, but they are fragmented. Their dynasties sleep, feud, and calculate in isolation. What they lack is a unifying vector capable of mobilizing the galaxy's most aggressive military force in history. Horus provides that vector. The Legiones Astartes,
The Mechanicum, human industry stretched across 1,000,000 worlds. To the Silent King, Horus is not a leader. He is a catalyst. This understanding defines the nature of their agreement. There would be no oath, no symbolic gesture, no false assurances, only parameters. Horus is permitted autonomy so long as his campaigns accelerate the collapse of warp dominance. The Necrons provide technological support, not weapons in the traditional sense, but infrastructure killers. Blackstone arrays, null-field generators, devices designed to suffocate psychic space rather than conquer territory. The Silent King does not care who rules humanity, only that humanity stops feeding the warp. In return, Horus offers something the Necrons lack: unpredictability. The Emperor fights conquest, chaos fights destruction. The Necrons proceed to eliminate entire sectors. Horus learns to redirect his grand strategy, shifting focus from cities to planets, from planets to networks. He does not destroy warp entities, he starves them of reality. The Silent King observes and calculates. He provides minimal feedback. This is no negotiation, it is a calibration. Horus then does something unprecedented. He actually seeks the advice of the Silent King, not on strategy, but on legacy. If I am to destroy the Emperor, he asks, what comes next? The Silent King responds with data, projections of multiple scenarios, all ending in ecological collapse, all leading to inevitable extinction. The only variable is the intervention of the Necron technology, not to rebuild humanity, but to manage its decay. In this moment, Horus understands a deep truth. The Silent King does not desire humanity's submission. He wants its neutralization. Horus brings about the end of the heresy, but not the war. He becomes the first human to voluntarily undergo the process of biotransference. He chooses this fate not because he fears death, but because he understands the ultimate meaning of doom.
Victory in the Horus Heresy was never about who could kill the most enemies. It was about who could control the structure of the galaxy. The Imperium did not survive because it was strong. It survived because it controlled movement, communication, and belief. Chaos attempted to tear those systems apart through corruption. A Horus-Necron alliance would have dismantled them with precision. The first and most devastating change would be the nature of the war itself. There would be no galaxy-spanning warp storms choking reality at random, no uncontrolled demonic infestations consuming worlds Horus still needed intact. Instead, the war would become surgical. Necron null technology would be deployed not as a weapon of terror, but as a strategic tool. Blackstone pylons and null field arrays would be positioned along key warp corridors, gradually collapsing the Imperium's ability to travel, communicate, and reinforce. This alone would have rewritten the conflict. The Imperium depends on the warp for everything. Without stable warp travel, sectors become isolated. Fleets cannot respond in time. Worlds fight alone, unaware they have already been abandoned. Horus would not need to conquer every system. He would simply need to disconnect them. The Astronomicon, the beating heart of Imperial navigation, becomes unstable as Necron suppression zones expand. Astropaths lose clarity. Messages arrive late, distorted, or not at all. Command collapses, not in fire, but in silence. The second phase targets infrastructure, not populations. Horus understood that terror creates resistance, silence creates confusion. Forge worlds would be isolated rather than annihilated. Mars itself would not be invaded immediately. Instead, Mechanicum supply lines would be severed, STC data routes disrupted, machine spirits starved of the psychic reinforcement they unconsciously rely upon. Imperial technology begins to fail, not catastrophically, but inconsistently. The worst possible failure. A bolter jams when it should not.
A void shield flickers, a plasma reactor runs colder. No single failure is decisive. Together, they are fatal. Meanwhile, Horus's legions operate differently. Freed from the need to accommodate demonic allies, they fight as they were meant to. Disciplined, coordinated, and overwhelming. Astartes strikes focus on decapitation, not occupation. Governors vanish, admirals die. Entire command echelons are erased in hours. Without warp communication, replacements never arrive. The Imperium bleeds leadership faster than manpower. The third phase is psychological, and it is here that the alliance becomes truly unstoppable. Faith cannot spread in silence. The imperial cult, still nascent during the heresy, relies on miracles, visions, and psychic resonance. Necron suppression zones smother these experiences. Saints do not manifest. Omens fail. The Emperor's presence becomes distant, abstract. Loyalty erodes. Not because people turn traitor, but because they feel alone. Chaos cannot counter this. Demons cannot manifest reliably. Cult uprisings fail without warp reinforcement. The gods scream into a void that does not answer. And then comes Terra. In the canonical heresy, Terra survives because the Emperor can still act. He still anchors reality. He still guides fleets and minds alike. In this version of events, Terra is not assaulted immediately. It is isolated. Necron technology surrounds the Sol system, collapsing warp access without triggering a catastrophic backlash. The Astronomicon dims. The Emperor remains alive, but increasingly alone. This is the most important difference. Horus does not seek to kill his father. He seeks to make him irrelevant. Cut off from the galaxy, the Emperor becomes a prisoner of his own design, a god without worship, a beacon without reach. At this point, resistance becomes fragmented. Guilliman's realm is cut into disconnected pockets. The Lion's fleets are forced into real space travel delays. No Primarch can coordinate with another. They fight shadows. Horus, meanwhile, controls the clock. Every year of isolation strengthens the Necron stranglehold on the warp. Entire regions become permanently hostile to psychic activity. Humanity's greatest advantage, its psychic evolution, becomes a weakness. By the time Terra is finally confronted, it is no longer a throne world. It is a relic. The Imperium does not fall in a single battle. It simply stops functioning. And that is how the galaxy is won. Not through fire, not through demons, but through the systematic removal of the conditions that allow resistance to exist at all.
Chaos is often described as infinite, endless, a force that cannot truly be defeated. This belief has become so ingrained in imperial and traitor thought alike that few ever question it. Chaos is treated as a fundamental law of the universe, as inevitable as gravity, as eternal as time. But this belief confuses presence with dominance. Chaos is not infinite. It is conditional. It exists because the warp exists, and the warp exists because sentient minds generate emotion, belief, fear, hope, and hatred at a massive scale. Chaos does not create these things, it feeds on them. That distinction is everything. A Horus-Necron alliance does not attempt to destroy chaos directly. That would be futile. Chaos thrives on opposition. Every war fought against it strengthens it. Instead, this alliance targets chaos's supply chain. And chaos has only one: emotion, belief, psychic excess. The moment Necron null technology begins to spread across the galaxy, chaos loses the environment it requires to function. Demons do not die in these zones, they simply fail to exist. There is no dramatic banishment, only absence. Rituals collapse mid-incantation, possession becomes unreliable, warp entities flicker, distort, and vanish as reality asserts itself with mechanical indifference. For the first time since the war in heaven, chaos encounters something it cannot corrupt, tempt, or outlast:
silence. Chaos attempts to adapt. It always does. The gods intensify their influence where they still can. They push cult activity to extremes. They demand greater sacrifice, greater devotion, greater emotion in shrinking regions of warp-accessible space. But this desperation accelerates the problem. Excess without expansion becomes self-destructive. Cult worlds burn themselves out. Demonic incursions consume their hosts faster than new ones can be corrupted. What once spread like an infection now collapses into isolated outbreaks. Chaos begins to cannibalize itself. The gods turn inward. Rivalries sharpen. The great game intensifies, not because chaos is strong, but because it is starving. And starvation makes predators reckless. Horus understands this. He does not need to confront the gods, he only needs to deny them relevance. The Necrons provide the tools, but Horus provides the strategy. He avoids regions of heavy warp saturation where chaos might still concentrate power. Instead, he targets the edges, fringe systems, secondary trade routes, under-defended sectors. Chaos loses territory not in grand defeats, but in quiet abandonment. World by world, the warp recedes. As this happens, Chaos's greatest weapon turns against it: fear. Fear fuels chaos, but it also destabilizes it. In suppression zones, fear has nowhere to go. It does not echo into the warp. It does not empower demons. It remains trapped inside mortal minds. And trapped fear becomes despair. Despair does not empower chaos, it paralyzes. Cultists lose faith when their gods do not answer. Champions weaken when their blessings falter. Demon princes find themselves unable to manifest fully, their ascension stalled by the absence of psychic reinforcement. The gods rage, but rage without an outlet is meaningless. Attempts to directly assault Necron infrastructure fail catastrophically. Demons cannot interface with technology designed to deny their existence. Warp storms break against null fields like waves against stone. For chaos, every response makes the situation worse. To escalate is to burn out. To retreat is to concede space. There is no winning move. This is why chaos could not stop it, not because it lacked power, but because its power was the wrong kind. Chaos is entropy masquerading as strength. The Necrons weaponize stability. Horus exploits the difference. As the heresy grinds on, chaos realizes something horrifying. The rebellion no longer belongs to it. Its champions are dying permanently. Its symbols inspire nothing. Its promises ring hollow in a galaxy growing quieter by the year. The gods did not lose a war. They lost relevance. And relevance is the only thing chaos truly possesses. By the time the gods understand what is happening, it is already too late. Their influence is confined to shrinking pockets of reality, violent, unstable, self-consuming. They are no longer shaping the galaxy, they are reacting to it. And chaos has never survived a universe that does not need it.
The galaxy that Horus envisioned was not one of chaos or conquest. It was one of control. A systematic, inexorable order enforced through technology, discipline, and the cold logic of the Necrons. But all alliances have limits. Even the silent king, for all his calculated patience, cannot tolerate anomalies forever. Horus, by definition, is an anomaly, a variable introduced into a system of perfect calculation. Useful, yes, dangerous, certainly, but temporary. The final betrayal is not sudden. It is procedural, predictable, inevitable. Horus's role, as agreed, was to destabilize the warp, isolate imperial systems, and neutralize chaos influence.
He succeeded beyond even the Silent King's projections. Entire sectors became null zones. Demonic activity plummeted. Psychic powers faltered. Human worlds descended into confusion and despair. The Imperium's network of command collapsed quietly, almost imperceptibly, but irreversibly. Chaos could not recover, but Horus did not understand the full implications. The Necrons do not act on loyalty, they act on efficiency. Once Horus's utility reached its peak, once he had accelerated the conditions that silenced the warp and crippled the Imperium, he became obsolete. The Silent King, as always, calculated outcomes over emotion. Horus's legions, vast though they were instruments of the broader strategy, not its endpoint. Human fleets could be redirected, Primarchs could be neutralized, worlds could be quarantined, all variables accounted for. And then Horus, the Warmaster, realized that his choices had built a cage for him, not a throne. The betrayal is clinical. The Necrons withdraw selective support. Warp suppression devices isolate Horus's forces at critical junctures. Supply chains fail. Loyalist Astartes, previously contained by his influence, begin to maneuver strategically against him, exploiting gaps he cannot anticipate. He is not destroyed by overwhelming force, but by the absence of necessity. He cannot reason with the Silent King. There is no negotiation. The alliance never included equity. It was never meant to. Horus is not punished for pride, for ambition, or for betrayal. He is removed because he is redundant. This is a far more terrifying fate than death in battle. To be unnecessary is to be erased, not violently, but systematically. Every victory Horus won has paved the way for his own obsolescence. The Imperium may still survive in fragments, chaos may linger diminished, but Horus is no longer a factor. The Necrons have no interest in kings, warmasters, or gods. They care only for outcomes, and the outcome they enforce is a galaxy where the warp is contained, chaos is irrelevant, and human civilizations are subjugated, reorganized, or pacified according to cold, timeless calculation. Horus's ambition, once the engine of rebellion, becomes the instrument of his own displacement. The realization is slow, as befitting a being accustomed to war and worship. He understands that every strategy, every conquest, every manipulation he undertook was necessary to the Silent King, and only to the Silent King. His own power, immense though it seemed, was always provisional. As he stands on worlds he helped neutralize, seeing fleets immobilized by fields he does not control, witnessing psychic phenomena that refuse to respond to him, Horus comprehends a truth he had never confronted before. In a galaxy where gods cannot act and men are isolated, Horus is a relic. Not through failure, but through success. Chaos, stripped of influence, is trapped. Humanity, fractured, is powerless. The Imperium, isolated, cannot intervene. Yet Horus, once Warmaster, is no longer needed. His choices made the victory of the Silent King inevitable, and the Silent King does not reward those who merely accelerate his designs. And so, the final betrayal is complete. Horus does not fall in glory. He does not die screaming in a storm of fire and demons. He fades into irrelevance. He becomes a shadow on a galaxy that no longer bends to ambition, faith, or emotion. The galaxy does not burn. It goes silent. The Necrons do not gloat, do not celebrate. They do not intervene. They calculate. They correct. Horus, the would-be Warmaster who sought to overthrow gods and reshape reality, finds that the only force in the galaxy more unyielding than chaos is inevitability itself. And in the end, this is the most brutal truth of all. Power, strategy, and ambition can win battles, but in the universe ruled by logic without compromise, even the mightiest generals are instruments, not masters. The final betrayal is not vengeance, it is mathematics. It is the execution of an equation in which Horus himself is a variable no longer required. The Warmaster stands alone, surrounded by worlds he has influenced, fleets he has commanded, and systems he has isolated. Yet none of it secures him. None of it matters. History will remember his deeds partially, inaccurately. The Imperium may attribute the silence to divine intervention. Chaos may claim eventual resurgence, but the truth will remain hidden in the cold calculations of the Necrons. Horus's story ends not with fire and ruin, but with absence. The galaxy he reshaped continues without him. And the lesson is clear. In the endless game of existence, even the most powerful are disposable.
Chaos lost because it chose passion over control. The Emperor failed because he chose secrecy over trust. And Horus stood between gods and chose the wrong one. Had he chosen silence over screams, order over madness, the galaxy would not burn. It would go dark.